Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Just Deal With It, where Tamara and I bring in all the things in life that you just need to deal with. Today, I am so ridiculously excited to talk about toxic exes. We have Michelle with us today, which I'm really excited for. Thank you, Tamara, for bringing her in. And I'll tell you, I was really excited about this one because I got out of a relationship and I feel like my relationship was actually run by the ex. And I started putting two and two together and getting information that was just given to me. Basically, in my particular sense, I thought it was really weird. It was like I started seeing this guy and he was totally love bombing me, and I was like, okay, we'll see, how this goes. I totally fell for him. And as I'm starting to hear things, A, B, C, and D, I noticed his like really doing everything his daughters wanted. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Like when you have these older daughters, is it actually the daughters or is there something behind that? So I'd like to say toxic exes create manipulative children. So in my particular experience towards the end of the relationship, it was a little weird. Let's see. This woman says she wanted the divorce. She told him to move out. He did it. She told him to start dating. He did it. She told him to get a bigger apartment. He did it. Number 5, 10 months into our relationship, everything was going great. Run into her on the street accidentally. I just kind of like saw like he's trying to get her attention. I'm like, what is going on? It's almost like if she noticed him and he didn't say hi to her, like she probably would have had his balls on a platter, is what it felt like to me. 3 to 5 days after that, I noticed his emotions going up and down, and it was just crazy. So I'm saying number 5 is, hey, maybe you should just continue to concentrate on the girls. Hi, 21, 19, and 17. They can concentrate on themselves. And I started realizing, he wasn't hanging out with his parents as much for holidays. I mean, tell me if you think this is weird or not. Thanksgiving, he spent it with her family, even though they were separated. Not his family, her family. She would want an Uber ride, he had to do it. Everything at the drop of a hat he did for her, even though they weren't together anymore. So to me, it was just like, what is going on? I was in a three-way relationship here. So for me, I started to notice this woman would start to tell the daughters things, and the daughters would manipulate dad, and the relationship just got so toxic. So in my instance, I realized that this guy, really nice guy, was being run by this toxic ex. I think she wanted her cake and eat it too. I wouldn't even doubt it if she had like cheated on him and maybe that's why they were separating. I mean, I don't know the story. He wouldn't tell me the story. All I know is that it was just absolutely crazy that all she had to do was call. All she had to do was get upset, and his emotions would change constantly. So I realized that I was dating a guy with a toxic ex. She got everything she wanted, and I got dumped at the end. Well, actually, I dumped him. And that was really amazing. But so Michelle, I want to like hear about your experiences with toxic exes and get more insight.
Well, I had a recent one, and by the way, thank you for sharing yours. I have a lot of questions around that, so many layers. But to me, well, quite recent. I've had an 8-year relationship that started out pretty much like a whirlwind, and I'm sure all the red flags were buzzing around, and I just didn't pay attention to them. So, unlike yours, where it seems like the toxicity may be coming from the ex-wife, right? Mine, I think, came from the man I was seeing. So, it started off with us meeting. I was dealing with some very difficult, some challenges at work, and then this guy just had all these buzzwords, buzz actions. It was like a dream, and it was just, I've known him to see other people, and that in itself to me was a red flag, which I didn't really pay attention to at that time. Extravagant gifts. I think
Love
in the
bombing.
span of a few months it was wonderful, and then it's just slowly I started to see a, a lot of the issues, and at that point I think I was so head over heels over the person that I kind of minimized it a
I
lot.
think we were dating the same person, Michelle, because that happened to me.
you know there's 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 a site for that, I believe, in Facebook. What was that? I'm not sure. What is that? Do you know? Have you heard of it?
No, no, it's called Are We
We
Dating the
dated the
Same
same year.
Guy?
I wouldn't
Oh
be
my God.
surprised. Except mine does not have a 17 and a 19-year-old.
And 21.
And 20 and 21. Or who knows? I don't know.
That
But
he
yes,
knows of, Michelle.
Exactly.
Mara knows the backstory to this. It's a long story, but the toxicity was there, and it was a cycle for 8 years, and I've just recently got out of it again. But
Wait, did you say again? You just recently got out of it again?
again, like maybe earlier this year, I'd say, yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
you were
We do
together.
have we do share a child, so that's the difficulty where it piqued my interest when you said that toxic relationships and toxic partners can create toxic children, right? I thought about that, but I'm not so much experiencing that. I'm just I'm seeing only in I've seen it in the work that I do. I'm in the helping industry, in social work, is in social work, and I work with families, and I see it as well. I'm excited to hear of how toxic relationships impact children, but also the partners.
Honestly, I had this whole big story about how toxic this was, but I don't think mine is as toxic as yours. I'll be honest with you. You win, Michelle. You win. Even though mine
Without
was
getting
much.
into the details.
No, I know. I know the details. That's why. But I mean, I do would love for you to share some details because I think that's very therapeutic also just to let go of this stuff. We could also process it together and think about why this person is doing this. When we talk about behaviors and we talk about how they affect us, we also don't think about where those behaviors were learned from, right? They didn't just appear. When you're born on a clean slate. How your parents fuck you up is a different story, right? Or whoever is your caregiver. So, and we all do it. It doesn't matter. You could be the perfect parent. Something, somehow, some kid's going to get traumatized. Something. Because that's part of living. That's part of growing, things that they're exposed to.
So in talking,
So,
go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. So like I'm just gonna wrap up in that sense. So I just think that it's so important to talk about how this person made you feel and was aware that he was making you feel this way. And that he went back and lived with it and continued to live with it and then came back and reached out and continued to do it from a clean slate as if nothing happened, as if they're crazy, none of this shit happened. Here I'm coming back. By the way, hi, let's start over. I want to give it another chance. That's narcissistic. That's ghosting and coming back and wheeling you in, playing the cat and mouse game, and things are great for those couple of days or even a week sometimes, and he's going to take you to restaurants, he's going to give you what you want, and then boom again, you want stability because that's normal. That's what people want in relationships. And he's making you feel crazy because how can you want this? Because that's insane. That's not possible. What are you talking about? And then he does the same thing over and over again. I'm seeing this from personal experience. I went through it for
Yeah, I'm
20
starting to think
years.
we're going into your story. It's
Right,
like
this is
so amazing.
yeah, this is related to her story and my story because
Yeah.
that's it's a lot. So how much can you allow somebody to wheel you in? At what point do you put your foot down and say, I'm worth so much more? I'm worth the person not giving me these crumbs. I'm worth saying, hey, no, enough is enough. I'm done.
Tamara, I think, and that's we're all social workers. I think that's the issue, though, is that these narcissists are so talented, if you will,
Oh yeah, they're
that
masterminds.
the gaslighting, the guilt, and all of that. Like, yeah, you do eventually get to a point where you realize, like, there's something not right. But I mean, they've played this cat and mouse game so often until the point where we are like, okay, I'm exhausted. And so it's not that we don't value ourselves, it's that I think, at least for me, it's am I not seeing this correctly? Am I the one that's seeing this wrong? I mean, he seems like such a great guy. Really, but at the end of the day, it's like we finally get to that point where we're like, no, it's not me, it's them. But that
So
takes
the
a
thing
long time.
So the thing about narcissists, this is what we know about narcissists, right? Their whole game is about appearances. They create a mask. that they want everyone to think they are. They need to be the perfect friend. They need to be the perfect supporter, the perfect husband who's cheating behind his wife's back and having sex with 45 women, the perfect everything, right? And once that mask starts crumbling because someone calls him out on it, he retracts like a little turtle, right? Into his little shell and runs away and finds new supply so that he can validate his bullshit, so that they could lick his wounds because, oh no, he got hurt because someone called him out on his bullshit, right?
Violent
And
is
then
right now.
I'm sorry. Exactly, right? So we have this, right? But in Michelle's case, this person is using their child to manipulate her.
Okay,
I'm
so
making
let's
line.
get into that because
Yeah.
Michelle, I want more details on what happened with you.
Okay. So I met this man. He was in multiple relationships, long-standing relationships. To an extent, I knew about it, but I had been separated for a while. I thought, why not? Developed into something much more serious than I had expected. And I think a lot of that was really attributed to his skills in, what is it? It's love bombing, as you say, right? It
Yeah.
was the 24-inch long stem roses, the very upscale, classy dinners, the shows, surprise treats, chocolates at work. It was insane how in 2 months since from meeting him, he told me that he loved me. Right? We ended up having a child together, but he didn't want a child, so I decided to do it on my own. Separated, and he came back. He came back, disappeared for another year, came back again, disappeared for another year, and he's been in and out for months or years at a time, just kind of cold turkey. You know, as you said, when the mask slips off, we're all Tammy and I. Well, let me just say that at some point we start to notice the cracks, right? And so there are some who remain quiet about it, and there are those, such as myself, who will address the discrepancies, the inconsistencies, and so that's what I do. But as with narcissists, they like to keep their perfect image, right? And so they go elsewhere until that fizzles off. And so that's, I think, what happened in my relationship. But unfortunately, it's one of those things where we say we had plans that he bailed out. He said he had something to do for a family. And then the following day, he calls me and he's coming home. You can hear him coming home from elsewhere when he said he's been home all day. Stuff like that, you call them out and they just kind of disappear, at times disappear for long periods of time. And in my case, oftentimes I've decided, let me just let it go. It's something minor. We can work it out. Maybe it'll get better. But it doesn't, because, with a person like this, they tend to push boundaries, right? Test your limits. And so that's what it's been over the years. For me, support for our kid has always been kind of contingent upon, whether I shut up and put up with whatever BS is being presented, right? And it came to a point where, I really felt like I was losing myself. So when I think about like toxic relationships and red flags, yes, I think about the other person who's inflicting and perpetuating these things. But I also think about it's more revealing about work that needs to be done within me. Right. So I'm more introspective in that sense. And I'm at a point where I'm thinking how I reflect on why I've put up with it for as long as I have, because a lot of people would not.
Yeah, this really goes into I love that you're asking the question why. And for me, I asked myself the same question. And for me, it was, that emotional unavailability of my mother. And so always seeking that approval, people pleasing. And I think that for us, people out of the desert, it's like making sure that they're happy. I also think I was in a toxic marriage with a narcissist as well. And, I got to the point where, excuse me, clear my throat. I got to the point where the gaslighting was so bad. I was thinking to myself, maybe I did remember it wrong, maybe. But I knew that I wasn't remembering things wrong. And so I had this notebook that I would write the date and the time and what was said. And then I would blame my learning disability as to why I had to ask the questions over and over just to make sure that I understood it. Because, with my learning disability, and I had to start playing those games to realize this isn't me, this is him. And for me, it was the emotional unavailability, needing that validation, and it's oftentimes good looking people that are doing this to you. I don't know if
Well, it's
that's
interesting you say you said something about record keeping, right? Essentially, because I've been at that point where I've questioned my own sanity. Did I hear it wrong? Because I have excellent recall, and
yeah.
so I would literally write things, and I have a journal on my phone. Unbeknownst to him, I had a journal on my phone. And so we revisit the topic, right? So that's not what you said. And I'd look back, and this person looks completely genuine, right? Had I not had my notes, I would be genuinely questioning myself. So, having experienced that for as long as I have, and I think it's really hard when the longer that you stay in this, the more difficult it is to leave.
Yeah. You mentioned, now that we brought this up, the guy that I had been with, not my ex-husband, but the last guy, it was interesting. He had mentioned certain things, for me, kind of like with you. He said, I love you, I think, after the first 2 weeks.
Red flag.
He had me meeting his parents, and I was like, very lovely people, by the way. He was like talking about us getting married and all that. Anyways, the ups and downs, as I calculated, that was like, it was just too crazy, and it always had to do with the daughters. That's what the manipulative children come in, which I want to touch about, Michelle, because I know that you wanted to ask a question on that. But at the end, I was like, yeah, I think we should totally do this. And I started testing his boundaries on things that he said, and he just like, I never said that. Why would you say I said that? And I was like, whoa, he's gaslighting me. And I intentionally was starting to push things to see if I was right. Because on the outside, a very, very, very dear friend of mine, he's 78 years old, and God bless his soul, he has helped me in so many different ways. And he gave the analogy of the banana. He's like, you can see this beautiful banana, but on the inside it can be rotten and squishy. And that's the thing that was hard for me with this guy. I was like, good looking guy, looked confident, seemed confident, but man, was he fucked up on the inside, And then my friend gave me this other, he's like, but there's bananas that don't look perfect on the outside, but they're so great on the inside. And I think that goes into how we can be, I can tell you, I was superficial. I was looking at the outside, and my value was based on the outside, not on really what the inside was.
So my mom used to tell me something about men. She used to say, the man has to be a little bit better looking than the monkey. And that is so freaking true. Not to say anything about my boyfriend. My boyfriend's super cute, but that's not the point.
Right.
Like, when you're looking for the partner, we tend to look at what's right in our faces. Something that's like, they're making the move. They're trying so hard. But why are they trying so hard? Who needs the validation? You or them?
That is a great question. I mean, it's actually good to consider when you see something in a relationship advance so quickly. Why? What is the rush, right? When you have all the time in the world, what is this rush to get you hooked or attracted or attached so quickly?
Control. They need control.
So, Michelle, I actually want to touch base on, so you have a child together, and I know you asked me about manipulative children. How old is your child, if you don't mind me asking?
6.
Okay, so your child is still young, but in my experience, I truly believe that the ex was telling the oldest, maybe even the middle. The youngest daughter was phenomenal, amazing, but guess what? She didn't get along with her mom. So, she couldn't get played, which was interesting. But I truly believe that the mom was using the oldest daughter, and the oldest daughter at the end, I started noticing, she's like, where are you? What are you doing? Like, he'd be on speakerphone. He started taking his calls in a different room. So I'm starting to think that he had said that we had broken up. And once the ex saw us on the street, and she must have said something. But oftentimes the ex doesn't want you to be happy. They seem like, oh, I want the divorce, I want this, or I want that, or yeah, we're better off apart. But the child, I mean, that's what tugs at our hearts, right? We don't want our children to be disappointed. And so in my experience, what the ex will do is, tell daddy or tell mommy, that you're going to be really upset or can you believe that dad's moving on so quickly? And these things get into the child's brain, and that's where, and your child is pretty young, but I would definitely watch out for that. This is a really great spot to talk to your kids. And
But there's a difference in that, my child isn't at all connected to his dad. So he
me,
wouldn't. No, I'm serious. He would come over so often, but it's never at an hour when his child is awake.
wow.
So that was one of the point of contentions in our relationship is, I was really holding out with the hope that he would plan for his child, but never did. He came from me and that was nice, but it came to a point where I saw my son being disappointed and being neglected in those areas that I couldn't continue in a relationship where I was getting attention and at the cost of my son. I would have preferred to give up my time with my ex so that my son can have a father.
Yeah.
So it's I can for people who are manipulative in life and in relationships, it's not unusual that they also do it to their children. It's just how they deal and how they get things done. So that's certainly not surprising. It's challenging, I think, for you because it's the toxicity is not necessarily was not coming from your ex. There were
Right.
parties, so it was difficult to address it. And I'm wondering how you even handle that kind of situation without bringing that third party in.
That was the thing. And, I'm glad you mentioned that because I had written that on my notes. As we're talking about toxic exes, it's not just the person that we were with, right? Like my ex became toxic because of his ex, right? And so it was like this triangulation, if you will. Yours is like we're talking directly about your ex. And so I think it's important to note that your ex may not be the toxic one. They may be getting fed from the outside, and that's where I'm saying like the toxic ex of the ex or whatever.
Like the abusee becomes the abuser. So the victim, the survivor
Exactly.
becomes the abuser because
Exactly.
that's normalized. It's internalized and it's normalized. And now this is the standard way of behaving in a relationship.
Well, and this goes with psychological abuse, which I know we're going to talk about in a different episode. Everything that I learned about this person, his ex was psychologically abusing him. And so when we talk about how did we not get out of this? How did we not get out of our relationships or see our values before? I asked myself the same question with this guy. It was funny. The mom had said to me that the day they met this woman, the grandmother had met this woman for the first time. This is when they first started dating. She says, "This woman is going to break up your family." And it happened. So, I mean, there's something to be said about how someone can be so psychologically abusive. It's usually the narcissist that does that. Now, Michelle, what was it like? So, you're obviously not with this guy anymore, but I'd love to hear more about how you realized that this was toxic and how you got out of it and how life is now.
I think it really started to affect, I was really isolating myself. I was somewhat a secret to friends, to family, only known to a few. He was dating multiple people, there was only certain times to call. I think where I started to realize it was when it was impacting my productivity, my day to day, while I helped my ex get through work, get through school, and was at a mine was not being done. I was not doing the work. I was struggling. I was always tired because I was focusing on his stuff. So I was starting to lose my own priorities, my own goals, while I saw him get ahead with
Mm.
work that I've helped him with. And so seeing that over a period of time, seeing just the repetitive behaviors, because every time we broke up, I'm not trying to travel to his place. He always comes back, flowers and apologies in hand. And then it's just the same thing. So I think just realizing, I think I was just tired. I had like nothing else to give. Money, emotions, time, it was all going to him. And for me, I think my biggest wake up call was my son. As he was getting older, I think I really started to notice how much I could have been giving all this attention to him. And so for me, that was, I think, my saving grace, my son. That's when I really started to take this seriously. When I tried to do a little bit more work, as painful as it was, knowing what luxuries or assistance I may be giving up, I just knew that it was really for my son. So it's difficult in relationships when it's not as easy as, having a kid where, because we have this maternal instinct and we're always there for our kids. But in relationships where you don't have children in common, I don't know how much what will be a factor in people staying for as long as they do. What determines that? Is it, I don't know. I
I
mean,
could answer
what
that.
was it? Go ahead.
I could answer that because it took me 20 years to get out of something. I didn't share kids, I didn't have any of that. It's the whole aspect of self-worth and realization. It's knowing your worth. It's the fact that you always come back to something that is for sure. So no matter how shitty it is, you know that it's there for sure. Like, you know that it's, even if he's gonna leave, you know he's gonna come back. Even, and there's, you get used to the person, you get adjusted to the person. It's a cycle, but it's your cycle. It's an asshole, but it's your asshole, right? That's how you're viewing it, right? So for me to be able to get out of it, finally, I came to the realization that if I am not going to get rid of this person, if I'm not going to cut this tie, cut this bond, because we had a very, very strong bond. No matter what, we always felt each other somehow. And I realized that if I don't cut this, I am never going to find my person. Never. Because I was dating throughout all of this. I was seeing guys. There were some relationships I was in for months or whatnot, even for a year or even over a year or whatnot. But he was always there. I always knew, as abusive, as disgusting as he was my safety net. He was my safety net. And I had to burn that safety net in order to be able to say, hey, you know what? I deserve the full package. Yeah. Not just the package that gets delivered once a month. I need the package that comes and stays and decorates your house and helps you and supports you and calls you and asks you, what do you want for dinner? You know, um, that's what I realized I needed. So for me to get that, I needed to cut off the garbage.
Can I want to, so we've all had similar experiences, and I know that a lot of our listeners are going to be able to relate to this. And people know that I love talking about attachment styles. So my first question for you, Michelle, is going to be, I'm going to give you a couple. Number one is, were you securely attached before this guy, and who did you become? And did you become anxiously attached? So that's question number one. And then this kind of goes into, what symptoms did your body feel? Like, there's that gut reaction that but, what are symptoms that you started to feel within yourself? Did you have that anxiety? What did all of that? So I'd love to hear about your experience with this.
Okay. So to the first question, my attachment style. So I would say I was insecurely attached. I had an insecure attachment, perhaps on the anxious end. I did grow up with a single parent. My dad was never around. We lived in a different country while my mother worked here. And so she would send remittances for us to get by. So, I think there's a lot of that, a lot related to my upbringing and even my past relationships before that related to infidelity. So a lot of that kind of went into this relationship as well. But interestingly enough, I stayed in this one in light of all of that. For the second question, what was it again? What was my reaction, my physical reaction
Symptoms.
to
Did you
symptoms?
start to feel physical? So, for example, for me, before entering the relationship, I was very securely attached. I used to be anxiously attached, and I worked very hard to become securely attached. I noticed myself in about month 2 or 3 starting to feel anxiously attached. So, like neediness started happening for me. Just, kind of like that tightness in the chest, the need for validation. I hadn't had I hadn't had any anxiety attacks, but I had worked so hard to not get to that sort of feeling like that could be a possibility again. Really, I felt like that was, so my body was telling me like, this is not right. And I felt those physical symptoms. So I wonder if your body was telling you anything.
Yeah, so in the beginning, of course, everything was perfect. I felt great. There was a sense of security in having him around. And when I started feeling, physical symptoms, I think of insecure attachment, was when he started, because everything was like on overload, with the gifts, with the attention, with the praise, with the I love yous. But it was on such a high that once it started to fizzle out, that's when I started to, I think, become insecurely attached. I'm sorry, I started to manifest those symptoms. And a lot of that really related to being, say, paranoid, right? I'm thinking, now just feeling sick to my stomach, not being able to focus. Again, this, going through two different programs in school in this kind of relationship. I don't even know how I got through, but it was excruciating to get through it. Being consistently distracted, not 100%, not being able to do the work, having that cloudy brain, that foggy brain. So I think that was life. That was life for me. And it often happened when he was just silent and unresponsive. And that happened out of nowhere.
Mhm.
I had that too.
I'd see him right before work, dressed up, and suddenly his phone is off for a day or a weekend without so much as an FYI, I'm going out of town. So I think that was my body's. I think there were certainly red flags that I wasn't really paying attention to. Yes, a part of it was me in that, I had a lot of issues, trust issues that I've developed, but I think a lot of it was also, I think, my body and my mind telling me that this was not healthy, and for whatever reason I just didn't pay attention to it because I did tend to self blame. Maybe it's just me and I'm overreacting.
Absolutely. Yeah. What about you, Tam?
The way that I would feel in regards to like when it was all coming down. Can you just
Yeah,
repeat the
I
question?
mean, I feel like, and I think this is important for our listeners to, our body tells us something is not right. We talk about that, listen to your gut. Our previous speaker talked about that. Like, if your gut's telling you something, listen. And, to your point, Michelle, I think that we deny what our gut is saying. So we're like, no, I could be wrong. Like, no, like, this is just nervousness. But our gut gives us those reactions. And I wonder what yours were.
So for me, it was a little bit different because Michelle's experience with this person was 8 years. My experience was since high school, right?
Mm.
So he trained me. I'm
Mm.
going to say he trained me to normalize his
That's
behavior.
intense. That's intense to hear that.
Yeah, it's intense to say it because and I'll be honest with you, our first episode, when I just mentioned him, I felt so, I can't even explain why it was so hard for me to talk about him. And it's still very hard. And it's going to be very hard to listen to this later because I am still processing the fact that this was real. I mean, I think this is going to hit Michelle where I think it's going to hit Michelle because me saying this out loud makes this real. Me putting this out there and saying that this happened to me makes this real. For 20 years, he shoved me into a box. He made me feel like I did not exist for him. I was this dirty little secret. So when coming out of this, my body was always to giving me signs. My body was giving me signs for 20 years. The difference is I didn't respect it. I did not respect my body. My body, it was all about having that feeling when you're with that person because unfortunately this was my first everything. My first love, my first everything. So for me to come out of that and to accept what I did and forgive myself for what I did. It wasn't even about him. I didn't even care about it, forgiving him. He's unforgivable. He's done. I still got to go home to me.
Mm.
And I still got to be in a healthy place so that I can have a relationship, so that the person sees me for who I really am, not just somebody for a good time or somebody when you're feeling like being there, she's going to be there for you. I'm never going to be there for him again. It's done. My body went through pain, physical pain. But I'm going to tell you something. When my mom died, I realized what's really important in life. I stopped focusing on this stuff. I realized what's so important, and I started remembering what she would tell me in regards to him.
Mm.
And that just, like, my everything that was open just shut down when it came to him at that point because I started understanding how I was manipulated. So physically, emotionally, I felt liberated, honestly, because for 20 years I went through this motion.
But you
So I
went through the
find
motions of the for
exactly
20
the
years.
negative, the keeping the secret, the feeling like I don't exist, the not being good enough for me to even be acknowledged that I'm in his life and that he has feelings for me. Because after 20 years, I don't know, you got to be insane if you don't have feelings for the person. you know? So acknowledging that and actually saying this out loud and making this real, that's what's making me go through the motions even more. Because now, who are you going to hide from? Yourself? So that's my feelings about it.
I feel like this is, I think, Tam, when you and I decided to do this, our whole focus was really to give real life experiences and so that people could feel like they're not alone and, hopefully start their healing journey. And I feel
Yeah.
like just being here alone, with you two, it's just like, I feel like this awesome, like, woman powerhouse. We understand each other. We've gone through a lot of stuff. And I think even just this is really healing to go
Yes.
through that.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for having me here. Feels like a very safe space to share all of this. I'm trying to think, Tamara. You said that it was your mom gave you that like aha moment. For me, it was my child. And I'm wondering if in these kind of relationships, when we're trying, I'm wondering if there really has to be that significant aha moment for you to move on. If so, that's a shame that we're waiting for that breaking point.
I don't think you need many aha moments because you could be in several of these relationships. The difference is once you have that aha moment once, you're going to recognize them.
Absolutely.
It's true. I went out on a date and saw a red flag, a few in the first date, and cut it off.
Yeah.
So I think there is growth here, an opportunity for growth.
So what's going on now? Are you dating? Are you dating a lot? Are you seeing anybody?
I wouldn't say a lot, as you know, I'm very busy.
Yes, Miss PhD
Another
over
full-time
here.
job.
Yes.
School, work, no. Oh, no. I'm just trying to focus on myself and focus on my kids right now. I think as we go through this transition of my son's father disappearing abruptly, I have to spend extra time with him. And so I think as a family, we do that to make sure he has all the cushions around him to make him feel loved. Because as you've said before, toxic parents can create toxic children. And so we want to mitigate that because at the end of the day, all these individuals, with this level of toxicity, it comes from a place. It comes from their upbringing, right? And so we want to stop that cycle ourselves. And so that's what I'm focusing on right now with my kid. And then I don't think I'm quite ready for something too serious. If it's there, it's there. Thinking back to your second podcast about where to meet men. I had a good laugh, but
So did we.
Yeah.
I've done all of that, but I think when you're ready, I think is the biggest thing. I think when you're out there looking, and I think you'll be disappointed. It's when you really don't look. I think that things work out a little better.
I think it's a good time to kind of circle into a close, but I think that we all find ourselves to a point where for me, it was, I chose me and I have my kids, but they always know that I'm there for them. But at the end of the day, I think what I love about what we've done today is given out our real stories so that hopefully people know that they have a place where they can come to, with us, with their friends, and just know that they're not alone. Because this really sucks to have to go through this process and then go through this war to find your aha moment. We're not alone. I mean, this is happening to millions of people out there. And it's not just women, it's men. Like I said, I think that, my ex, it was being psychologically abused. So I'm hoping that this show here gives people that awareness that, number one, they're not alone. You can always reach out to us and get experiences. Know that there are other experiences out there. But listen to your body. Your body is telling you what's going on. And yeah, does a breakup suck? Yeah, because it means that we were either rejected or we decided that, we weren't good enough or whatever childhood experiences come back to us. But we've got to choose us. We've got to choose happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I've learned here is trust your gut. You can't ignore it. It's there for a reason. And I really appreciated how you mentioned you asked about what were these physical symptoms that we were feeling. I think it's important for us to really pause, as soon as we feel those things, because we often don't pay attention to them. The signs are so subtle.
They are.
No, I also remember one thing that happened because I was so stressed. I started losing my hair. Also,
Mm-hmm.
it was
Mm-hmm.
a physical symptom as well. Like now that you're talking about it and I'm thinking about it, Yeah, hair started falling out. I was under stress. I was in school. I just lost my grandfather at the time when all this went down, and it just COVID, everything, combination of stuff. So yeah, physical symptoms are extremely important. And those are usually the first things that you're going to see before the emotional piece hits you really hard, right?
I read an article. I know we're going to close off soon, but I read this article that I shared with you, Tamara, and it says we ask for signs. We pray, we spirituality, we ask for signs, and we get signs. They're just not the signs we want. The signs we're getting are the signs that are telling us where to go. But narcissists play such a great role in our lives that they take us to a place where you said it beautifully, Michelle. I had nothing more to give. I didn't have money. I didn't have time. I didn't have emotions. It sucks that we have to get to that point, but it's that point that you go, aha. And then you start to become the person you deserve to be.
Yes. I wish it wasn't the case where you come to the point where you have nothing else to give. And in my case, feeling a level of, I don't know if the word is disgust for your own self, for what you put yourself through that really propelled me forward. But yes, listening to the signs, paying attention to the signs, hopefully, but relationships, I think we get wiser as we go through relationships. So these are all, I think, essential
Yes.
to
Yeah.
becoming better and to growing.
Michelle, oh my God. I
Thank you.
loved having you on this show. I'd love to have you back again sometime.
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you for
Fantastic.
inviting me. Yes. Let me know.
Thank you
Thank
for
you so
sharing your
much for
story.
joining us. Thank you guys. Happy Tuesday. We'll see you next week. Thank you, Michelle.
Bye.
See you. Bye.